Hi everyone and welcome to my Diablo Barbarian guide for Season 5. This is a build that I have been working on back on the PTR that you can see here in the background right now, and I have been going back to theory craft an even better version of this now that the final patch notes are out. So this is something I'm personally quite excited for to play in Season 5. It is based on the new Third Blade unique item that allows your Diablo to become a spammable core skill effectively. So instead of a cooldown, it now costs resources, and you can see here you spend a lot of resources, and we have a setup in this that allows us to also generate a lot of resources to the point where you can spam a death blow that costs 150 fury per hit, and we get all the resources back every time we do that. So the fury crafting part behind this was actually really interesting, and I want to show you what it's all about. This is most likely not going to be the strongest Barb build out there, but it should be pretty solid. What you see here is just like a really unoptimized version. This will be easily crushing T100 plus to get the maximum master working materials. And I estimate you can probably reach something like half, even maybe up to 1 billion DPS once you are fully optimized in the late game. So it is still pretty powerful and quite up there with some other builds, despite the Barb nerfs that I have received. I think that maybe Bash and Flare will be better builds, but I really like this setup, so I want to show you what it's all about. I have this planner here. You can also find all of my planners on my Discord server. You can find the link in the description if you ever want to look for any of my planners. We have an entire channel here with lots of stuff, and here's the Deathblow Barb as well, but it will be linked in the description. I have multiple sets here. There is a Whirlwind Deathblow combo setup that is very similar to, for example, the Whirlwind Hoda build that you might have seen back in the Abattoir of Zir times in Season 2. Effectively, you try to weapon swap with Whirlwind and Deathblow, so they get a lot of resources back from stuff like Furious Impulse and the Weapon Master Legendary Paragon node here. So you can get a lot of resources that way, but later on we actually get to the point where we can just kind of spam the blow like you just saw in that clip here. Now there have been some tweaks since the PTR with how the setup works, also some changes to, for example, Crown of Lucio. That is a big enabler for this whole setup, and the idea is that we spend a lot of resources on every attack in order to proc our effects. There's a Ring of Red Furor that when you spend 100 fury, you will get a guaranteed crit on the next attack in the next 3 seconds. So as you spam Deathblow, you want to try to get the cost to over 100 per attack so that you can get this guaranteed crit effect. We don't need to stack any crit chance, and we also have the encroaching wrath aspect that has kind of a similar effect. You spend 100 fury and your next weapon mastery skill will deal a lot more damage. It's a very powerful aspect, and we also proc this every single attack. So that's kind of wild. And in fact, our resource cost is so high that with every 2 attacks, we can also get a guaranteed overpower from the Banished Lord's Talisman. You need to spend 275 resources. Our Deathblow will cost 150. Once our Crown of Lucion is stacked up, because it increases the cost of the Deathblow with every attack up to 5 times, it will cost 150, and then every 2 hits will be a guaranteed overpower from Banished Lord's Talisman. Every hit will be a guaranteed crit, and you get this combo online very easily. Now the main problem to solve is how do you actually generate all these resources, and there's a very interesting combo which is Invigorating Fury and Starlight Aspect. So this is what I have put in here. So for every 20% of the life that you heal, which works with overhealing, you get 40 primary resource, and you can actually temper Invigorating Fury. You see here in the setup, for example, are 13 ranks. So we get 39% of our maximum life for every 100 fury spent. Since we spend 150 per attack, we actually trigger this 1.5 times. So at least once guaranteed, get 40% life, and this gives us 80 resources already. Now this healing is also amplified. For example, from willpower, we have extra healing received here, plus 42%. And we can also throw in like a healing received roll here on our pants, for example. So this 40% healing is actually more like 70%. So we trigger Starlight Aspect at least 3 times, giving us 120 plus resources. And then this is amplified by resource generation, which we also have on willpower. For example, here's like 12% resource generation. For example, you can have resource generation tempered on a ring. So instead of getting like 120 or so resources, we are actually getting something more like 160, 170 or so resources. So this is pretty wild, and this is how this entire engine comes online, with lots of Invigorating Fury and then a Starlight Aspect. Of course, this is something that will require a bit of a setup. it will not be that easy to just play this from level 1 or something like that, because you kind of need all these uniques to really get the combo with the overpowers and the crits and then this extra resource cost. Now, there is a way to also increase the resource cost early on with Unbridled Rage. So if you don't have Crown of Lucian just yet, for example, you can do that. And you can also get to the point where we spend 120 resources per death blow. So this will be pretty nice as well. But you don't get this, exact combo where you can just spam death blow just yet. This is something that comes later with the Crown of Lucian. And the main difference here that you can see is that we use Whirlwind to also spend some extra resources and get our weapon swaps in order to make sure that every 2 death blows we still get this Banisher's Talisman effect. Otherwise, once you get to the late game, we just replace Whirlwind and we go with Flay. This is mainly to get the Walking Arsenal bonuses. So here we do a switch from Unbridled Rage to Walking Arsenal. Walking Arsenal is a relatively decent key passive now that all of them have been rebalanced a little bit. So we want to have, one of the weapons on the Flay, which is activated sometimes. We maybe try to stack this damage reduction effect. You don't really want to Flay that much. It's mostly just to get the Walking Arsenal bonus. Spam Death Blow with, in this case, dual wield, because we can get the Moradni's Magnum Opus here. We can have a lot of Maximum Fury. That also helps us out to like smooth out this insane resource spending and resource generation, so they have a little bit of an overlap and a little bit of like a pool, so it's not really too close. It has extra maximum resources, and we also want to stack it from other sources. Crown of Lucian has some, for example, there's some on the Paragons. So Maradni is a very powerful item. We're going to do dual wield the death blow here, and then we also have our last Walking Arsenal bonus. You want to select charge and leap on your last weapon, basically. So in this case, we do like the two-handed slicing weapon for Flay, dual wield for the death blow, and then we do the bludgeoning weapon with leap and charge. If you don't know, you can select which weapon is used by which skill in game by using this skill flyout interface, and then you can press the middle mouse button on the PC. I'm not sure what button it is on the controller, but there is some keybind that you can use to select the arsenal selection. So here, for example, I can do this in a planner as well. If I press my mouse wheel, it switches the selection here, as you can see. So that is kind of the main combo of the build. Now there is some other like defensive and offensive powers in here and some other really good uniques. One important unique that is required to make this work is the third blade. I mentioned this at the start. This is actually how you can spam death blow without getting this kill blow effect. So usually you want to kill an enemy to get a cooldown reset, but like this, it's actually a resource spending core skill. And in addition to that, also a weapon mastery skill. So you can actually benefit from multiple effects. For example, you can have exposed vulnerability here, get just perma vulnerable all the time. And for this setup, for example, a tempered exposed vulnerability. So it's very easy to get this effect up. And there's some other perks like that all over the trio on the Paragons that help us out a little bit. We also have the Overkill Mace that was getting buffed. You get the Shockwave for your death blow, so you have a bit of an extension of this extra damage effect. In fact, when you are close to an enemy and you hit it with the original hit, you can also double hit it with the Shockwave. So you get a lot of extra damage here. This Shockwave also benefits from all of the original damage buffs that apply to the death blow. So this is really powerful as an AoE tool. This thing also gets updated with lots of really good stats, and you can get lots of ranks of death blow. So a very strong weapon. And you see here we actually have 3 unique weapons. It's kind of wild. And in fact, when you have Ubers, you can go 4 unique weapons. There can also be a grandfather now. In this case, we move, for example, the Encroaching Wrath to a normal slot instead of the two-handed. And we remove, I think we had Edge Masters here, nothing really crazy. So you just replace this, and Grandfather is also being updated to have a lot better stats. And all stats also helps you out with more willpower, for more healing received, for more resource generation and so on. So this kind of just makes up for the loss of, for example, this Invigorating Fury tempers that we would otherwise have on our chest. And then we can equip Terrier's Might, which is an insanely powerful defensive item in Season 5 as well. So this is kind of like the end game version of this build, where you have full unique weapons, and then you have this. You have lots of uniques. There's only like a few legendaries here, as you can see. But this is like the final version. Now the exact fine-tuning of, how much resource generation we want, how much resource, we get from Migrating Fury and stuff will depend a little bit on the exact gear setup you have. Also, for example, how much have you masterworked this all stats on your grandfather, or these kind of little things as well. So once I get to play this in Season 5, I'll probably do a bit of more fine-tuning on the planner. If you run into resource issues, then keep in mind you can get more resource generation. For example, here on the ring, you can temper this. You can try to get another, for example, healing received roll on your chest. It can also roll there instead of the life roll, for example. More healing received gives you more invigorating fury healing, gives you more resources from Starlight. In general, just trying to make sure you have a good Starlight aspect. This is kind of important here as well to get all of the resources. And you could try to also make more use of this Furious Impulses here. So sometimes you maybe sneak in like a Flay for the weapon swaps, get Furious Impulses, or just use Flay to generate some resources. So there are various ways of solving this. There's also, for example, Fury per second that I put here on the boots. This may not even be required, but for now, I guess just to like, you know, get the setup online, get it more smoothed out early on, I think this is good to have. And then you can see if you maybe actually remove this to maybe get an extra strength roll or something like that. So the fine tuning has to be done depending on your progression, depending on the gear. But once you have a full setup, you will be able to run something like this here and actually get to the point where every attack is a crit, every attack approximates the Encroaching Wrath, and then every 2 attacks has the overpower. So this is kind of the combo here. There's also a fairly defensive setup. We have Iron Skin in here. This may not even be required, but it is very cool when you just try to survive higher end content. But we have a lot of healing, so it's actually not that easy to even activate Iron Skin. Maybe it would be better to just go Challenging Shout if you want to have a bit more of a proactive damage reduction effect, for example. This can also help you out of a bit of extra fury here, for example. Here I have the War Cry. This also gives us Berserking, but it's easy to get from Death Blow as well. For example, some resource issues might occur where you can also go for the Fighter's Death Blow. That gives you fury every time you Death Blow, so you get part of it back already just by using it. And as long as you solve your Berserking uptime another way, for example from Warcry or from the anger management aspect or something like that, so you can do this for example as well here, then you can just like get a setup rolling much more easily. But the Warcry is optional. You can also go Rallying Cry if you want the Unstoppable and extra resources there. So there's also another way to solve this here. And the rest of the tree is mostly just like good passives. So here's like the defensive cluster with Imposing Presence, Martial Vigor. We have Pit Fighter for offense, we have Counter Offensive, we have a bunch of these passives here for extra damage, and then finally Walking Arsenal. And for the Paragons, it looks like this. So we have a few different setups here. Most importantly, at the start, we use the Weapon Master node that is later being replaced because we don't really care that much about the weapon swapping all the time. We just kind of want to like go and just spam Death Blow as much as possible. So there is a bit of a respec here once you drop the Whirlwind. But for the most part, it is a fairly similar setup. We have a bunch of really powerful Paragon nodes here. So first of all, Blood Rage gives us the extra damage while berserking when we stack damage while berserking. We have a Decimator, since we constantly make enemies vulnerable and overpower, we get a really nice bonus there. Bonebreaker for the occasional guaranteed overpower, also has a bunch of good damage reduction nodes here. And then we have a bunch of glyphs basically. So there's Territorial for damage reduction against close, there's Ire for extra damage reduction against elites and extra berserking damage, Ambidextrous to buff these magic nodes here for damage reduction and also the extra dual wield damage. Dominate for extra overpower and overpower damage, Undaunted for extra damage reduction here, and finally there is the Martial Glyph. This is just something kind of temporary, so sometimes you can shout and get your charge or your leap cooldown back, since you kind of rely on those early on a little bit to move around, and occasionally also trigger your Walking Arsenal bonuses. So this can help you out. It's nothing really crazy. I didn't really find like any other really good glyph, so I just went with this there. But later this is replaced. We don't go with the Martial anymore. And instead we have a 5-board setup, and we drop the Weapon Master, we drop the Martial Glyph, and we just kind of like pick up more useful nodes all over the place. We have a lot of this like extra maximum life, extra maximum fury here. We get a Warbringer in there to get our Fortify later. And like this, we have a relatively defensive setup, insane healing, and you can just spam away on your Death Blow. So personally, I'm quite excited to try out this build in particular when I go and play Barb. It will probably be my third or so character when I start the season. I'm planning to start with Sorg first, and then we'll see. But I'm really excited to see how this build will actually play out once we get there. So I hope you enjoyed this guide. I will keep you guys updated with any kind of, improvements I make once I actually get to play it, because a bunch of the stuff is untested with the reworked uniques and so on, so we'll see what actually happened. But if you are looking forward to playing a Deathblow Barb, then here you go. We also have a written version of the Deathblow Barb on Maxroll by Snail, I think, so you can also go check that out. So I'll just link that in the description. It's also going to be kind of similar anyway. I hope you enjoyed this guide here. I wish you good luck in Season 5, and I'll see you guys next time.